What's good, creative fam? Brandon Washington here, and in today's video we are going to be taking a look at this guy right here. This is the Sony A7R III with the 24-70 G Master lens. What's going on, guys? First of all, thank you so much for checking out the channel. If this is your first time here, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button because this channel is all about filmmaking gear, tips, and tutorials. And so in this video, as I said before, we are going to be taking a look at the Sony A7R III. Now, recently I went on a trip to Las Vegas and I needed something small to go with me. As a lot of you guys already know, I am a huge fan of the Canon 1DX Mark II. I own that camera. That is my main shooter. But for this trip, I was going to be going for 2 days and I needed to pack extremely light. So with that being said, I needed something a lot smaller than what I could get with the Canon 1DX Mark II. Hence the reason why I picked up the Sony A7R III for a few days. Now, when it came to looking at mirrorless cameras that are currently out, this was by far the best one in my opinion, but I had actually never shot with it. It was something I just came to the conclusion with through other reviews that I saw. Now, personally, I needed something that not only took great video, but I also needed something that made amazing photos, which is why I landed on this camera. Now, no, I did not go out and buy this camera, but in fact, I actually rented this camera specifically for this trip. Now, that is a little hack that I recommend a lot of you guys do. If you are looking for a better camera and you need it for a specific situation, definitely consider renting it because it allows you to open yourself up to more opportunities. So why am I making a review on this camera? Well, this camera shocked the mess out of me. I was actually very impressed with this camera, and it did come very close in comparison with my Canon 1DX Mark II. And so I wanted to touch on 3 little topics that I think that are really important for this camera. First, we're going to talk about the photography. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the video specs. And then third, we're going to talk about it in the sense of its size and its travel capabilities. So first, let's talk about the photography. This thing is amazing. It has a massive megapixel count. This thing not only takes amazing stills, but it has tons of features to make sure that you're getting just the shot that you're looking for. Things like focus assist, if you are going to be manually focusing, to be able to actually punch in and allow you to get your focus just right, and also giving you focus peaking while shooting photos. On top of that, if you do want to try to do some autofocus, it has tons of autofocus points, and then probably one of my favorite features on the camera, something called eye autofocus. Now, I know a lot of Sony videos have already talked about this, but until you use it, you don't truly appreciate how amazing this feature is. If you're taking any still photos of a model or of just like a family member or anything, and you want to make sure that you're getting their eye perfectly focused, not only does it lock onto the eye, but it tracks it while you're trying to shoot. And even in continuous shooting, you're never going to miss that eye being in focus, which is a great shot, especially when shooting at night, because at night is the hardest time for most cameras to be able to focus because there's not enough light, and this camera still did an amazing job. Now, the last thing that I liked about this camera when it came to photography, and it also kind of bleeded into the video side, was that EVF, which is the electronic viewfinder. Being able to look through the viewfinder and actually see my image the way it's going to look when I take the picture was a huge jump for me because, as I mentioned before, being a Canon 1DX Mark II owner, I don't have EVF, and honestly have never used it because no Canon cameras except their mirrorless cameras actually offer that. And personally, I'm not a huge fan of the Canon mirrorless cameras right now, so I've never really used electronic viewfinders. Well, this thing was phenomenal in the electronic viewfinder, not only to be able to actually see my image as I was taking it, but then also just reviewing my images. The images looked so sharp and so clear inside that EVF that I could actually just look back at my images and truly see all the detail. And I know it may sound a little crazy because of how small the EVF is, but trust me, being able to see your image in that EVF, it just really allowed me to see how well my image was taken. Now, moving that over into video, the EVF also works in video, which is great, especially for having that extra point of contact. Being able to place the camera right up to your eye actually gives you that extra level of stability. Speaking of stability, this camera has built-in stabilization, which is a huge bonus, especially again coming from someone who has a 1DX Mark II where I don't have that. I found that the built-in stabilization was massive. Now, it's not perfect. You're not going to be able to walk around. It's not gimbal-like stability, but for doing nice little reveals, or especially if you're using the strap as an extra point of contact and then you're using that along with the built-in stabilization, it really does allow you to get some really smooth shots. Now, when shooting on this camera, you can choose to shoot in 1080p up to 120 frames per second. Also, you can shoot in 4K up to 30 frames per second. Now, yes, this camera does have 4K, but it is slightly cropped. But coming from someone, again, with a 1DX Mark II, where my 4K is also cropped, it wasn't really a huge issue for me. It actually just gave me a different type of focal length. So I didn't really mind the crop of the 4K. Now, the one thing that I did not like about this camera when it came to its different shooting capabilities was the fact that at 120 frames per second, it wasn't as smooth as my 1DX. It still felt like I was shooting in like 60p. So, I mean, the 120 is still very nice, and I totally enjoyed having it, and it definitely came in handy, but it just really didn't come off as smooth to me as it does in the Canon system. Now, although yes, it doesn't come off as smooth, I will say that having a lot of additional video features almost makes up for that. So this camera allows you to have things like zebras, and not only having zebras, but being able to customize your zebras, which is something I had never really ever like seen or even experienced before. So being able to tell the camera at what point or how much overexposure you want zebras to come in at. So that way, if you're really trying to hold in some of those details and the highlights, you can have it set to where you actually get zebras way before you actually overexpose. The other thing that I liked about this thing was that, again, it did have focus peaking, so if I needed to manually pull focus, I could. So if the camera was struggling to autofocus, I could manually focus myself. The next thing I really like about this camera is all of the different picture profiles that it comes with. Sony has really allowed you to customize the mess out of this camera, and I think that's one reason that kind of scares a lot of Canon shooters away from the Sony, is that there are so many options. I mean, you have S-Log, S-Log 2, S-Log 3, there's like Gamma and Movie and Cine modes, and there's so many different options when it comes to setting this camera up. But what this means is that you really are able to dial in the look that you want to get. Now, I didn't get a lot of chance to play with all of these different modes, but I definitely am interested in just taking like a week with the Sony camera and really testing out all the different modes to figure out which one is truly the best and which one works the best in different situations. So it is nice that Sony allows you to have all those options, especially in this camera, but ultimately I think it might be a little overkill, but if you can figure out which one is the best, then you don't have to worry about the rest. Alright, and so the last and final thing that I want to touch on is the traveling capabilities of this camera. Clearly, the reason why I went with this camera was because I needed something small, and this camera definitely does not disappoint. Now, it's not the smallest camera. Obviously, Sony has things like the A6500 or the A6300 or even the A6000, but I wanted something that was full frame because personally, I just love full frame cameras. I honestly, at this point, don't feel like I can shoot on something crop framed, but it is an amazing full frame camera. I also wanted something that was small, lightweight, and I wanted to only take one lens. Now, with someone like myself who's obsessed with gear and always has tons of gear on me, traveling with one lens was going to be a little bit difficult, and so that's why I went with the 24-70, because it gave me a variety of focal lengths, and I knew that having the 4K that actually cropped would allow me to actually punch in for some shots if I wanted to shoot in 4K, and so it gave me a little bit more versatility. When it comes to a traveling camera, this is a great camera to travel with. However, I don't know if I can make this my main everyday primary shooter. Certain things like the autofocus is something that I live and breathe by with my Canon, because most of the time I am running, gunning, and shooting by myself. I don't have someone to be able to pull focus. A lot of the things that I shoot are one chance shots because they're live events or they're coverage or concerts or whatever. And so if I miss my focus, I basically have lost that shot. And in some situations, that is not an option. So for me, I personally find that when it comes to the autofocus, that is the most important thing for me for my everyday shooter, which is why I'm currently still sticking with Canon. Don't let my opinion on that portion of it skew your opinion of this camera. This is a phenomenal camera, but at its current price point, it starts to beg the question, are you better off buying this camera or a used 1DX Mark II? Personally, I'm still gonna be rocking with the 1DX Mark II, but this is a phenomenal camera to rent. I loved renting this camera, and if I do find myself doing any more quick traveling type videos or quick traveling type stuff, I'm definitely going to see myself picking back up this camera again, because it was so easy to learn and use, and I love the images and the video that I was able to get out of it. So that's my quick little review on this camera. I hope this was helpful to you guys. If you guys have any follow-up questions, definitely leave those down in the comments down below. It is a great camera, but it's not the perfect camera for me, but I did want to give you guys my input on it. So if you guys are on the fence and you're trying to maybe save some money, I'm not a person who thinks that Sony is garbage, even though I am a Canon shooter. I actually love both systems. I personally think that there are perfect cameras for each situation, and you have to figure out which camera is best for your situation and what you shoot. So, wanted to give my 2 cents on this camera. I love how this camera came out. I love how it worked, but ultimately, I'm gonna leave it in you guys' hands as far as what you want to pick up next. So if you're new to the channel, again, definitely hit that subscribe button, because this is what this channel is all about. We're always talking about filmmaking and photography, gear, tips, and tutorials. And if you guys love this video, hit that thumbs up button, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.